Jeszcze Stongo, Gary 5 Jaho Jefkados, Mvskoke Radio, Mabo Hedgewitskis. Joining me again today is one of our newest reporters, Morgan Taylor. Welcome, Morgan. Back for round two here today. Huh?
Yes, I'm glad to be back. Glad to be on the show today. Hope everybody's having a good day.
Yeah, we're hoping that everything works out today. I got a less complicated program, so maybe we won't foul it up as we have in a couple of other things. Now, first of all, in our first segment this morning, I am going to be talking to an organization that actually kind of gave me my start in radio, Mvskoke Communications in Minneapolis. Mvskoke means eagle in the Ojibwe language, and they are responsible for putting out one of the first radio magazines on Native affairs that was used nationally, and an after-school program that has grown by leaps and bounds into serving the community and giving Native kids up there a chance to see beyond the horizons of their normal high school education. So it'll be nice to talk to them, but unfortunately they were the victims, let me say, of some of the destruction that occurred during the riots up there over the recent killings of George Floyd by Minneapolis police officers. They were on a block of the city that was burnt down, and unfortunately they lost everything. But the community has responded well. So we'll be talking to Kelly Drummer, their president, about what happened there and how they're bouncing back and working to reestablish myself. And then later on, Morgan?
Yes, we will be speaking with Dr. Lancer Stevens about the Native Youth Preventing Diabetes, which they call themselves the NYPD. It's a coalition of about 20 different tribes, and they provide diabetes prevention education for children ages 8 to 12.
Okay, great. But let's get going and roll here. Let me get your name and the formal title first.
Okay. Kelly Drummer, President.
President of?
Mvskoke Communications.
Okay. First of all, for people who are not familiar with your organization, why don't you give us a quick capsule of what all Mvskoke is?
Sure. So Mvskoke started in 1977 in radio, actually, with First Persons Radio, and evolved from First Persons Radio to work in education, particularly with Minneapolis public schools in helping students in education, culture, and graduation rates, and also provided technology needs in the community. And then that is still a core part of our work, is working in the schools. We now work in Minneapolis public schools, St. Paul public schools, Fridley, Farmington, and Hopkins school districts. So we've expanded into 5 districts over the past 3 to 4 years, so that's a big expansion. And then we've continued our work in First Persons Productions, but our focus has been in film, now social media, certifying youth in social media, and still some work in podcasts and radio. And 5 years ago, we started our Green Jobs program, which focuses on the green economy and training youth in those fields. So we've evolved and really have 3 core programs working with youth 14 to 24 years old in both education, culture, leadership, training, and employment.
Now that's quite an expansion. I remember when they were building walls in the back of the OIC building there near Little Earth. So you've come quite a way there. Now, Mvskoke has grown to become quite a media center then for the urban Indian community there in the Twin Cities, right?
Yes. Yep. particularly within education and youth work. We are the largest organization working in that area, Division of Indian Work. They do some work in youth work, but not as expensive as we are in all these school districts, and with the employment piece as well.
Now, you were caught up in the collateral damage during the recent riots there regarding the killing of George Floyd, was it, that by Minneapolis police, and Mvskoke suffered some extensive damage there. So tell me a little bit how that happened.
Sure. So I actually was there all 4 nights after George Floyd was killed. And so the first night there was, some peaceful protests on Monday night. There's some gatherings, and then by Tuesday there was some things happening, but it was still more protesting. But by Wednesday night, almost our whole block, except for Mvskoke, was broken into, broken windows. And then Thursday night, when they took over the 3rd precinct, all the buildings on our block caught on fire, including the ODD building and the post office, and we were sandwiched in between. And so the cinders from those fires started our roof on fire. And we just found out yesterday that it is a total loss, and it will have to be torn down. So basically the whole city block of Lake Street and 27th will be torn down. It'll be a shell. So it's very sad, I think, just for the entire community and then the Native community, because of this tragedy. We were the only Native organization hit, but we were close to the 3rd precinct, which our location had a big factor in what happened. So our plan now is we are going to be working with the Indian OIC and the Minneapolis American Indian Center to start our programs July 6th. We will have our high prep culture and leadership service learning program at the Indian Center, and our First Persons Productions and Green Jobs program at Indian OIC, working on training and employment.
Now, the First Persons Production end of it is, I guess, the part that I am most familiar with. That actually produced a radio magazine for widespread distribution.
No, the First Persons Productions is really a training program for youth now in film and video. And so we have 5-week trainings and training youth in social media and film, and then they participate in a 5-week internship with a business and creating their social media and media needs. So it's both a training and now internship program that they produce products for businesses that they in their social media needs. So it's a little different now.
yeah, it's come quite a way, and I watched the success of the program from its neighborhood over there in Phillips to the newer spot on Lake. Now, real quickly, with the loss of that building and everything, has anyone talked to a dollar value by any chance, or got an assessment of the equipment and resources that you lost?
So the building was a total loss, and our insurance coverage was $1.5 million. We also had a loan to purchase the building, but it did cost us to redo the building almost closer to $2 million. So we've already taken a loss on that. We were only in the building for like 8 months because of we moved in July of last year, and then due to COVID, we had to close down in March. So everything in there was brand new. And so for me, Elaine Salinas retired in 2018, and she I was the founder of TY Foundation, and I was leaving, so she asked me if I would help and raise the money for this new building that she wanted to kind of make sure, as she was parting, retiring, that McGizzy would have a permanent new space. And so I took the project on, and then 9 months later, I decided to take the president job. So for me, it was, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears putting into that, and then only being able to be there for literally like 8 months. But there's going to have to be quite a bit of fundraising. We don't know if we'll be able to rebuild on the land and what that would cost. There's just a lot of unknowns right now. So we are going to be looking for a space to lease, at least for the next year or so, until we can, finalize the plans on what it would cost to rebuild and what we would have to raise. So there's a lot of unknowns at this time around that.
I've seen some news coverage that included Migizi and some of the people in the community there. And I'm curious as to how the community has reacted. It looked like there was some very, very emotional support for your organization, and people were sharing the tragedy of its loss. So tell me, how did the community react?
Well, on Saturday, so Friday was the fire, Friday morning, and we had a little healing ceremony. And Saturday, we had over 200 people come and help clean out our space. And so everything was pretty much cleared out Saturday that we were able to get out of the building. And it was just amazing, the amount of people from all over, people we didn't know, just coming with their brooms and their dustpans to help sweep things out. So basically by the next day, the entire building was cleaned out. And then just the outpouring of support and donations. We've raised $1 million so far, just from social media, people sharing the fundraising. So it's just been a tremendous outpouring of support. And I think it's about $1 million with like $25,000 people, so a lot of really small gifts. And I do really have to credit the Indian Country News and other national news in spreading the word, because most of the donations are coming from all over the country. So, of course, I would say about 70% is from outside of the state and 30% is from in the state. So it's really, I think, just because we were one of the few nonprofits and the only Native nonprofit that suffered in this loss, just the support across the nation has been just tremendous. It's unbelievable, the support.
You mentioned elements of Native media there, and I've been around in this business for a long time and kind of watched its growth. What kind of coverage did they give you? Were you pleased with what happened there, the coverage from, say, Indian Country Today and maybe anyone else that was interested in your story?
Yeah, Indian Country Today, they did an interview, and then David Knoyer also produced a video that went out that's had a lot of views, and that was the day after the fire when there was a lot of cleanup. It was a really powerful video. And then the Star Tribune has been very, very nice. They last week there was an article about minority-owned businesses and what happened, and then I think Friday there was an article about giving, and then they listed us as a place to give, and then they talked a little bit about the American Indian movement protecting Franklin Avenue, and then they also mentioned that our building was lost. So I think locally the Star Trib has also been really generous in putting the information out there. So that's kind of been the gist of it.
Well, it's kind of nice to see our industry maturing to the point where it can do this sort of thing. Now, you mentioned AIM. Years ago when I was around in that neighborhood, there was an AIM patrol. that took over the area, sort of as a similar to the Guardian Angels program. And you mentioned they were there working with you, and I get the impression they were there to guard what was remaining and protect your people. Tell me about how the group worked in there.
So after being there Tuesday and Wednesday night, I mentioned to the staff that we need to have someone help us in patrolling, and so we called Frank Perro, and he sent a group. There was about 20 or so folks guarding the buildings, both in our front and in our back, and so they were there from about 4 o'clock in the afternoon until about 1 in the morning, and that's when the fires were really bad. And then from there, they went. They were protecting Franklin Avenue as well. So there was folks on Franklin Avenue protecting Native businesses, and then at our space. So it was community policing. I finally, after AIM left, I called 911, and the post office was on fire, and the trucks were about to blow up, and I just said, please, someone come, you have to come. And they just said, well, we'll try. So it was really disturbing, the whole 3 days for myself and my family, just experiencing that. And then the lack of infrastructure and police and fire. They kept saying the National Guard was coming that last night on Thursday, and they never came. So it was traumatic, the whole situation and what happened, particularly in our little street, because we were so close to the third precinct. Literally, you can walk, just up the street, and the third precinct was there. So,
how would you describe the relationship between the Native community and the police, particularly in that neighborhood?
I would say it's not good. It hasn't been good. I do also think that the officer that's Derek Chauvin, that's been charged with murder, also shot and killed a Native man, and so I think it's really near and dear to our hearts about what happened in that situation. And he was never charged, or it was never investigated. So I think the police relations between our community and Minneapolis police, hasn't improved either. So I think it's, I think what happened to George Floyd could have happened to any one of us. And so our community has really been at the forefront in the protesting, not the rioting, the protesting, and being supportive of our Black brothers and sisters.
Let me ask you about those demonstrations. Now, there's been talk that the Black Lives Matter movement and supporters were conducting peaceful demonstrations, and that there were elements of gangs and crime that were taking advantage of the confusion to break into places and rob things. What do you see? Is that accurate? Are people correct there when they assume that there's somebody kind of riding your coattails just for greedy purposes, shall we say?
Yes, and I mean I can say that just from being right there in the middle of it. There was peaceful protest, and then there were individuals there that were there to take and to destroy things, and they weren't from our communities. I just really don't believe that our community, people from our community, would have done something like this, that would happen. And there were instigators. We experienced, my daughter and I, looking out the window at the post office, that there were some kids. They were young, like 15 or just really young. And all of a sudden they were just, around, and then all of a sudden they had crowbars, and then they had gas, and it's like, well, where were they getting these things? And there was this individual, kind of this agitator, that kept coming around, and we called it our safe zone, our building and the building next to us. And, this individual kept coming around and kind of working people up. And so I believe, kids aren't just, they really don't have these sophisticated crowbars, and they're not carrying around gas. So for me and just my experience, there were people taking advantage of and looking to destroy our community. And I'm a firsthand witness of that.
What is now the relationship between the government of the city of Minneapolis and the police department and the Native community there? Have they made any overtures to come talk about reform or changes or get any other information from you?
There's just starting those conversations now. So Migizi is part of the Minneapolis Urban Indian Directors, and we actually, before the riots and everything started, we sent a letter to nationally and to all our government officials and the city of Minneapolis. And that letter has received some national attention about the killing of George Floyd and what's been happening to the Black community and our community and how we stand in partnership. And so that letter, of course, then the rioting, and there's a lot of things to fix and come to agreement on. But I do believe there's going to be deeper conversations in regards to that letter that we sent out as a collective to the city and to the state of Minnesota.
Where do you go from here? It sounds like a massive challenge that you've got to try and just recover to the point that you were at before. So does this seem like something that is achievable, and will it affect future plans?
Yeah, I think we have a lot of hope in rebuilding. It's just going to take time. And so that's where we have to be patient. Part of it is just knowing, revisiting again, where do we want to rebuild? What will that look like? Will it look different than what we had before? What will be the fundraising needs? We've raised $1 million. We have this money from insurance, but what more would we need to raise to complete it? So I know that the board and I have a commitment to rebuild. It's just a matter of what does that look like now. We don't really know, but Migizi has owned a building further down Lake Street that became a Walgreens, which also burned, by the way. That our other location we were at burned, and then we rented a spot for about 3 years, and then we built this building, and so I think there's a real commitment to make sure that we have a safe, secure, solid place for our young people to continue to utilize all our programming.
What about the rest of the city of Minneapolis? Are they paying more attention to its Native community now? Has it made a difference?
Oh, yeah, I think, I think a lot of our organizations especially Migizi and others, just kind of invisible organizations, really outside of the Indian community. Nobody really knew who we were or what we did. And so I think it has put Migizi on the map. It's put all of our urban Indian organizations and all the work that we're providing to the community. It's brought light and awareness to all of our work that we continue to do for our people in the community. So I've, like yesterday, I met, there's a bicycle group that raised money for us, and they wanted to give me the check, so we met at the building. And they said, we had never heard of you before. So I think in the broader community, it's elevated all of our work and what we do. So there's a lot of hope that has come out of this, that people now recognize us and know what we do. So it's a really great thing for us.
Right. It was pretty hard won, though. Now, Minnesota has a number of reservations and successful gaming opportunities and economic development from the tribes. Have any of those tribes stepped forward with any support? I'm thinking of, Metawakan and, that massive operation they've got out there. Whitehurst, Red Lake, any of the tribal communities step forward there?
Yes, Prairie Island was really the first to step forward, and Chairwoman Buck, she brought a check, and then her daughter raised some money. But I'm in conversations with the other tribal council members at Shakopee and Lower Sioux. I haven't had contact with the other tribes, but I think they're kind of waiting to see what the process is going to be and then where they could step in. But yes, we have definitely received support and how they could help.
Now, it would seem like a catastrophe like this would be kind of in some cases, kind of a death blow to your organization. It doesn't sound like that's going to be the case there. How would you envision the future then?
I see us as looking at how we can continue our programming. We have great programming, and that's what's going to sustain us, and then build the youth, and then look at how, when, where, and why do we rebuild, and where, and what would that look like from a community perspective? Engaging youth. Would they want to stay in the same space? Would we want to build somewhere else? What is the capacity of the board and the fundraising? How big can we be? How small can we be? It all has a lot of factors, but really basing that on community-based decisions and engaging youth in that process is really important to me and the board. So, like I said, I do believe it's a 2-year process, and because it took us 2 years to get to this new building. So I kind of know how long it takes to start from scratch. But I think it is an opportunity for us to continue to rethink and rebuild. That space we lost was just the most beautiful space you've ever seen. It was perfect. But then how do we take what we learned from our rebuild and fundraising efforts from that to the next phase? So I think there's just a lot of hope, and that we will be able to get there. It might not be immediate; it might take time, but we'll get there.
Right. Now, that's everything I wanted to ask you. Is there a final thought you might want to leave with our listeners?
I think that just from my experience of being right there in the riots, that I really believe that out of tragedy there is light and hope, and just like what's happened with Migizi in our building, the next day people coming in and cleaning out our entire place, giving donations, spreading the word that. That out of every bad, there's a lot of good. And so I think that's one thing I've learned through this process, even though it's been painful, that there's a lot of hope in the world for change, and we can change. So that's it.
Okay, well, may our Creator watch over you and support you and your people there. We're pleased to hear that you've got such a strong feeling towards rebuilding and restructuring. So may He bless you, and good luck with it.
All right. Thank you, Gary.
Well, it's changed my life. I'll put it that way. My previous work before working at the university was with students, and so Native students in particular. And so when I went to the university, I was kind of not allowed to do that. It just wasn't within the job itself. So this opportunity to again work with Native, not only the tribes but the Native kids was it's something I really enjoy. I really just love seeing our younger generations growing up to be healthy and educated and successful. And anything that not only myself, but the entire coalition feels this way. Anything that we can do to help them along their path to success is well worth the effort. So it's changed my life. I know that many of the people that are part of the coalition, I consider them family. I don't consider them just friends. And I would never had that opportunity was it not for this coalition. One of the things that I should mention too is that during that week that we're together, we actually learn from each other. So, for example, we run different classes, and the classes can range on a multitude of topics, usually around diabetes, but also other topics as well. And so we get to see and witness what other people are doing in other communities and the success they're having. So we learn those techniques from them, and we can take them back to our communities and use them there as well. So it's a learning experience, not just for the kids, but also for the coalition members that attend camp.
Have you guys had any, like, maybe participants or families participants outside of, people that you may know come to you and say, hey, this really changed my kid's life?
It's always funny. We have, after our camp, we always have, kind of a recap at the next meeting. And there's usually one or two stories of a child going to a parent saying, please don't buy that type of cereal anymore because it's mostly sugar. And then they'll show the parents, the food label, because it's one of the things they learn at camp, and how to read a food label, and show the amount of sugar in there, the amount of carbs in there. And it's always a funny story, because then the parent will call the person at the tribe and say, hey, this is what my child just told me. And so there's always one or two of those stories that come out. I will say one thing as well regarding the lab test. Again, the parents consent to that prior to camp, and then the children have to assent to it, so they have to agree to it. So if a child doesn't want to do the finger stick, they're not forced in any way. But there was this one child, and this was a few years ago, that was kind of scared about the finger stick, and then he saw, all his friends do it, and so he did it, and everything turned out fine. But later on, a few months later, we received word that they were doing another type of finger stick, but they were looking for lead poisoning, and he said that he had done this before, and so he did it as well as his family. And it turns out that there was lead in the household that they were unaware of, and so because of his bravery of being able to do a finger stick, he was able to help his family to figure out that there was lead in the house and that it needed to be taken care of.
Wow, that's amazing. You're instilling a lot in these children, not just healthy habits. Is that one story that you would say has stuck with you over the years?
Oh, there's many stories. I could go on and on and on, Morgan. We were giving a presentation one time at one of the universities, and this was years ago. One of our displays had some pictures on it, and so after our discussion, we were standing outside by the booth, and a couple of kids come up to us, and you could tell that they were Native, and they were just really respectful and just smiling ear to ear, and they were looking at the pictures, and they both go, "There I am," and they point at the pictures. So they had taken part in camp and were now in college and remembered camp and that camp experience. And so that was just really nice to see some children. And, I was thinking about it. We have the kids from our first camp are probably well into their 30s now.
Oh, wow.
In fact, we have one individual that he was actually part of the first camp, and he is now a health professional and comes back each year to take part in the camp and teach a subject. And I won't mention any names, but he's just a wonderful success story to see him come to camp and then continue on and get his education and want to give back. And that's what we want all our kids to do, is we want them to not only take this message with themselves, but also to share it with others that could learn from it as well.
So I know that you have a passion for studying, diabetes and general health and things like that. And do you think that, your studies and putting it into the NYPD has helped others broaden their horizons?
Well, I'd like to say yes. We had one of our, in fact, our past president and really the founder of NYPD, Dr. Michelle Dennison, has published many papers regarding NYPD during her time, and I know that's contributed to the research of Native youth. We were doing testing on these children before the American Academy of Pediatrics said it was a good idea to start doing this. So we've kind of been at the forefront on these things.
Well, from coming from a scientific point of view, not that I'm a scientist, but, from studying some basic science, I think that, putting kids together and they're in a controlled environment, running these tests, you get really good data.
Yes, you really do, because it is, as you mentioned, it is a controlled environment. Don't get me wrong, the kids eat. They have 3 square meals a day. They have snacks as well. But we decide what they eat, and it's healthy food. It's not uncommon for children to actually lose some weight during the week. It's not uncommon for the adults to lose some weight during the week because we're very active. But you're absolutely right. We have 17 years of data that we can look at, and as I mentioned previously, Dr. Dennison utilized that data for her research and graduated with honors.
Okay, Dr. Lancer Stevens, we only have about 5 minutes left, so we're in hopes that we will be at the residential camp next year, right?
You and me both. We miss it tremendously. It's so disheartening whenever we made that decision that we weren't going to have a in-person camp this year. But as I mentioned previously, we have a virtual camp, and so those out there that have children that are, watching TV or playing video games and not doing any activity, I would encourage you to go to our Facebook page. And you have to forgive me, I'm not a huge Facebook person. In fact, I didn't have an account until we decided to do this. But if you go to the Facebook and you look up Native Youth Preventing Diabetes, you'll be able to find the videos, and there'll be instructions there as well on how to enlist your child into the program for this year. And again, we're looking for children between the ages of 8 and 12, but it's open to children of all ages.
Okay, well, I appreciate your time today. I think that's all the questions I have. Is there anything else you would like to add before we let you go?
Just if I could put on my health prevention hat. So I know that the state has opened up, and we are allowed to go and go to restaurants and rallies or protests or what have you. But please understand that the COVID-19 virus is still there. We are seeing spikes and increases. And so I would implore you, please, if you do go out, make sure you wear a mask. Continue to wash your hands and be very cognizant of especially our elders, because our elders are the ones that are suffering the most from this disease, or this virus. In fact, for no other reason, go to Facebook, go to NYPD, and watch the video by Dr. Ryan Brown. It's very good. It talks about COVID-19 and how it spreads and what we can do to help protect ourselves, but also our loved ones. And it really is.
Right.
We are a community. It's not just us. It's all of us.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Coming from a public health professional, we need to hear that. We need to be reassured. So we appreciate you today. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Morgan. Bye.
Bye. All right, guys.
Okay, nice job, Morgan. I think we've got a lot of information quite useful out with our audience. Now we're coming to the segment of our show where we actually do some community announcements, and with things starting to open up again, we actually starting to see some of this information. Why don't you take off with our first one here?
All right, guys. So Eufaula Canadian Tribal Town is hosting a outdoor arts and crafts activity. It'll be Saturday on June 20th at 9 a.m. TBA on the closing time of it. It'll be at the new venue, Posey Park, Eufaula, across from Nichols Grocery. off of Highway 9, a block from downtown. There is a fee, $20 to set up. Artists are responsible for your own setup. And keep your area clean. And be responsible for your own stuff. And there will be vendors there.
Okay, nice job. Welcome to the crew here. Now
Awesome.
we made everybody do that kind of thing.
My initiation.
Yes, yes. We want to remind our listeners that the Mvskoke Creek Nation Department of Health has a new pharmacy refill center, so you need to call in for your medications. It's a 3,400 square foot facility, and begins operation on the 15th, June 15th. It will add capacity and allow faster processing of refilled prescriptions. So if you're interested in that and want to avail yourself of the service, you want to call 855-771-4321. And we remind everyone, Jingi Okosis, wash your hands, and please take care of yourself. About a minute we got left. What do you think, Morgan? You're off on a career in journalism now. What's it doing to you?
I'm loving it. I'm always on the go. I'm always in people's business, which I love. People probably don't like it, but that's all right. I'm having a lot of fun.
It's a way to be nosy and
get paid for it.
All right. Well, thanks a lot for joining me today. All right. We appreciate you all listening. Check us out next week for more Mvskoke Radio. You've been listening to Mvskoke Radio. Join us again next week for more local, tribal, and community news and updates. But